Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything, everything black. Culture over everything, y'all, we taking it back.
Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Trevor Schoonmaker, Director of the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University, located in Durham, North Carolina. It's my pleasure to welcome and introduce two brilliant individuals and great friends of the Nasher Museum, artist Carrie Mae Weems and writer and Duke professor Mark Anthony Neal. Today's conversation is in connection with the outdoor exhibition and public awareness campaign by Carrie Mae Weems called Resist COVID, Take 6, which emphasizes the disproportionate impact of the deadly pandemic on communities of color, while honoring frontline workers and shining a light on systemic racism. The project at the Nasher extends broadly across Duke and Durham and is a collaboration with Duke Arts and Duke Health. Mark Anthony Neal is James B. Duke Distinguished Professor of African and African American Studies and Professor of English, as well as Chair of the Department of African and African American Studies at Duke University. Mark is the author of 6 books, including What the Music Said, Black Popular Music and Public Culture, Soul Babies, Black Popular Culture, the Post-Soul Aesthetic, and Looking for Leroy, Illegible Black Masculinities, as well as his forthcoming book, Black Ephemera, The Crisis and Challenge of the Black Musical Archive. Mark also directs the Center for Arts, Digital Culture, and Entrepreneurship, which produces original digital content, including the very successful weekly video podcast Left of Black, now in its 11th season, produced in collaboration with the Franklin Humanities Institute at Duke. I should also say that Mark is a longtime collaborator with the Nasher Museum. He currently serves on our faculty advisory committee, and over the past 15 years has given numerous talks and facilitated conversations, taught classes at the museum, and contributed essays to exhibition catalogs. Carrie Mae Weems is an artist based in Syracuse, New York, who is renowned as one of the most influential American artists living today. Through her use of image, text, film, and performance, her work crosses numerous disciplines to help us better understand our present moment by critically examining our collective past. Over the past 35 years, Carrie has participated in countless exhibitions at major museums across the world. There are far too many to name here, but in 2014, she had a 30-year retrospective titled Carrie Mae Weems, 3 Decades of Photography and Video, organized by the Frist Art Museum, and traveled to museums across the country, including the Guggenheim Museum in New York. Carrie was a 2013 recipient of a MacArthur Foundation Genius Award, and her work is included in a great many museums and museum collections, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, Museum of Modern Art New York, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Museum of Contemporary Art Los Angeles, Whitney Museum of American Art, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and the Tate Modern in London. Carrie also has 2 works in the Nasher Museum collection, I Looked and Looked to See What So Terrified You from 2003, and Ode to Affirmative Action from 1989. Carrie delivered the annual Rothschild Lecture at the Nasher Museum that some of you may have attended in 2014, and her work has been included in numerous exhibitions at the institution. She's represented by Jack Shaman Gallery in New York. Carrie and Mark, thank you so much for being here, and I pass it over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Trevor. And it's been an honor these last 15 years to do whatever I can with the Nasher Museum, because in part, I get the honor and the privilege to talk to folks like Carrie Mae Weems. How are you doing today, Carrie?
I am fine. It's good to see you. I was so nervous about it. So nervous. And, you're so brilliant. And I remember one of the first interviews, well, actually, one of the interviews that I did was with you at Duke. Maybe, I guess that was 2012, 2014. Right?
It was 2012. It was the second season of Left of Black. And you came into the studio at the John Hope Franklin Center. And it was a wonderful conversation then, and I expect it will be again today. Let me start, as folks were coming in to join us, they were listening to a West Coast artist by name of Leon, I can't remember his last name, but it's a song, Leon Bridges, and the song is called Sweeter. And it's a song that he wrote, in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing, to talk about just that basic desire, to live a life of sweetness, and knowing that that's not always a possibility for so many of us. And it's a song that I listened to repeatedly throughout these last 8 or 9 months. It's one of my go-to quarantine, songs out there. And I'm curious, just to get us started, what was the music that sustained you,
Wow.
over this last year?
Well, first of all, I really do have to say, I really want to thank you, Mark and Trevor, for inviting me to be here today and with your audience and with people that are interested in where we are, what we're doing, what we're trying to do, what we hope to do. And I have to have all of your books, by the way. I have I have them all. And your fascination with music, the way in which you think about music, the way in which you curate music, what you play, what you listen to, I think of as being critically important. What's on my playlist and what I listen to every day, or almost every day, depending on where I am, but almost every day, I start almost every day that I'm in the studio with Don Pullen's Ode to Life.
Oh,
that is where I start.
That's a favorite. That is a favorite.
That's where I start my day with Don Pullen. And I was introduced to Pullen's this particular music, to Ode to Life, by the great Helmut Blewett, who used it also as his kind of the background for his life. Yeah. He used it as a background for his life as he was sort of entering the last moments of his life. And he started performing it, right? Of course, Blewett had played with the World Saxophone Quartet for many years. And this is, incredible, advanced avant-garde music.
Yes.
And yet every day he was also listening and playing Ode to Life. So I start my day with Ode to Life, and then that's followed by Stevie Wonder's Love's in Need of Love Today. And that's followed by Could It Be Love? Marley's Could It Be Love? And then it goes to the World Saxophone Quartet, Dear Lord. And it ends with Gotta Be Free by Pharoah Sanders.
Pharoah Sanders.
So it's sort of this sort of block of music, and it is so important to me. It's the way that I enter my day. It's a way that I enter a certain kind of contemplative space that's important for my reflection and my consideration of where I am, what I'm thinking about, and what I desire most. And so this is the music that I'm listening to often, and I've been listening to it for years, not for the last few months, not for the last year, but for a number of years now. It's been sort of the core of my playlist. And I just want to just sort of follow that up with this. Over the last few years, I've been doing these talks about influence, the essay on influence.
Yeah.
Thinking a lot about, for instance, in the context of my lecture, the extraordinary work of Aretha Franklin, and the way in which in music, there's a consideration that if you can't play the standards, if you're not ready for the standards, then you really can't go out there. You really can't stretch. That the first thing you have to do is that you learn the standards, then you learn your articulation of the standards and how to play with the standards and move with the standards, and then you become your own person. And doing this has been so important. It's very different in the visual arts, where the idea sometimes of appropriation can be, quote, theft, wherein music is an absolute necessity.
Right.
So that I'm sort of living in this realm along with you gives me great pleasure.
Thank you. That was incredible, Carrie. As I'm thinking about your work, and particularly this moment, there's a way in which Black art always stages the future, and stages it in anticipating the crises and the trauma and the joys and the wins. But it always does that beforehand, right? That whole kind of Afrofuturism that's embedded in Black art. And so I think there's a way in which your work, even before this particular project, had already resonated for this moment. And I'm curious to ask you, do you remember the moment where, COVID became the thing for you that you then had to pivot to something, that everything had changed? Do you remember that moment? And when did you get back to work, after that you realized that moment?
Well, it was just about a year ago. Just about a year ago, last week, I came home from vacation with my husband. We take an annual vacation together. Came home, dashed to the grocery store, and there were a lot of people there, kind of boxing up. And, I'd heard kind of had wind of this thing. And then suddenly I realized that we were really in it, that we were in the age of this moment. And I was on the phone actually with a very, very close friend of mine, Pierre Loving, who became my partner actually on this project on COVID-19. We were talking about, we had just read the news that in Chicago, 82% of the people who were most impacted by COVID, 82% of the people who had died from COVID-19, even at that early stage, 82% were African American. And so I knew that immediately that there was a crisis ahead that needed to be dealt with, that needed to be understood, that needed to be unpacked in some sort of way. And my friend Pierre stayed up all night writing a proposal and sent it to me the next morning. And the next morning I started designing all of the assets that would be a part of the project. And I have worked on it nonstop for the last year.
The project Resist COVID, Take 6, it has been described and legitimately so as a public arts project. But public arts aren't new to you. I think back to the first time we talked, Operation Activate, which was another public arts project which dealt with gun violence in the Black community in Syracuse. And, folks have often described gun violence in Black communities as a pandemic in and of itself.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, why your commitment to public work to do this kind of informational work?
Mark, I really would rather be doing something else.
Yes.
I would really rather be like
I hear you. I hear you on that.
I would really rather be doing something else. But I have an active response to the world. I don't necessarily think of myself as an activist, but I have an active response to the world around me. And I think I learned sort of early on that I had a particular way with language, a particular way with words, a particular way of combining image and text that felt immediate, that was direct, and that for me, has always really been important. And then to figure out ways of sharing that with the community that I care about, with the community that I'm hoping to advance, with the community that I'm hoping that together we move forward together. I mean, one of the things that you said, I think that's so critical about who we are and what we are, as Black people in this country, is that we understand something about the extraordinary effects of trauma. And therefore, we have a very unique and very particular way of responding to that, unlike no other group in the country. Perhaps Native Americans, Latino Americans, etc. But we have a very unique position here within the United States. How we came here, why we came here, how we came here, gives us a very unique position in relationship to the question. And it's certainly, I think, for serious artists and the artists that I care about the most, whether they are musicians or poets or dancers or writers or photographers or filmmakers, we're always digging into unpacking the criticality of the moment in which we live. And so I'm a part of the changing same, as Amiri Baraka would say. I'm a part of a tradition of making, of looking, and being critical in relationship to that looking, and using the small skill that I have to advance a dialogue by asking always a set of questions, posing a set of questions that I think might be important for the community to engage. So that I'm not ever really sort of thinking about telling people what to do, but rather using the platform that I've been given to sort of figure out interesting ways of posing questions that cause a reflection, consideration, possibility on the part of the looker.
Yeah. You mentioned the changing same, and let me just put my cards on the table, right? I'm a stan when it comes to Carrie Mae Weems. So, I've been following your video page on YouTube for a minute, and you did a piece, in the beginning of the fall called "Hold On Tight." And there's a great line in that piece, where you say, we live our lives in the changing same. But a little later, you admit, I'm tired of living in the changing same. And I was struck by the images in the video because it's Carrie Mae Weems living the life of the mundane. I mean, you're literally standing over a sink. It looks like you're, rinsing some glasses and cleaning off some plates. Right. The thing that all of us have done in this moment, because even as we're locked in the house, we still have to heat and eat and all those kinds of things. But talk a little bit about this idea of being tired of the changing same, right? Being tired of being, as an artist, one of the folks who always has to be in that crevice, right? To make the connections between who we are in terms of our humanity and the trauma, right? And the conflict that affects us.
Well, there is no, I think it's sort of the double-edged sword, that it is absolutely exhausting to constantly be unpacking, finding your way, finding your footing, finding your path through these systems of oppression. These systems of destruction that are really meant to destroy you personally, to destroy your personhood, to undermine all of your effort. That you are constantly facing that day by day by day by day by day is an exhaustion. There is no doubt. And at the same time, I find a level of extraordinary inventiveness within that space, because I have to figure out a dynamic way of living in the face of this condition. And so making the work then for me is always kind of spinning around, how do you find joy, if you will, profundity, gravity, enlightenment, reflection, consideration, and meaning and purposefulness within the thing that you're actually unpacking simultaneously. So yes, it's difficult. I do a lot of crying. right? My little heart is breaking often. And at the same time, I'm alive and I have to find a way through the thicket. And how do I get through the thicket? And how do I use the work? And how do I use my voice that will allow me to move past the thing that is meant to stop me, the thing that's meant to destroy me? And then how do I share that with you? And how do I share that with the public? Because of course, we're all dealing with the same deck of cards.
Talk a little bit about the images that are used in the COVID project. I saw some famous folks. I saw Fred Wilson. I saw Carl Hancock Rux. But they're also just, images of everyday folks. Talk about the archive where these images came from.
Well, most of them, the vast majority of them come from my own archive. I've been dealing with the same themes really for many, many years. I mean, the idea that Black people, that brown people, that Native people would be the most impacted by this deadly virus is like the way in which we are impacted by race, or the way in which we're impacted by the economy, right? By the way in which we're impacted by poverty. The issues are really the same, right? And so at any moment, you're really trying to figure out when and where do I enter this debate? And so the material, I've been building the material for years. And so all of the material, much of the material that I've made over the last many years, many of the images, the photographs, the films, the videos, etc., can be used and rotated in and out of any of the issues that I really care about, because it's the same core issue, right? Something happens when you are, under a sort of system that is meant to destroy you. It doesn't really care about you. So that's how these works have really come about. For Fred Wilson, Carl Hancock, etc. I did a project for MoMA a few years ago, and those images, for instance, Don't Worry, We'll Hold Hands Again, or of course, All Life Matters, but the reality is that Black, brown, and Native people are the most impacted by COVID-19, right? So I made those images within that garden space. MoMA had invited me to do a project in the garden. I was the last artist to be invited. And I decided that I would recreate a series of events that had happened in MoMA's garden in the 1960s and 70s,
Oh, wow.
And 80s, but there were never any Black people there. So I simply brought in all of my friends, all of my colleagues for like a 3-4 day shoot, and reconfigured a whole set of conversations or rather I should say, events that had happened in the garden with my friends that included, of course, a number of different kinds of people from various ethnic groups. So, so again, always, sort of unpacking similar ideas through the work, and that's where the images came from.
One of the images that was really striking to me was an image of a Black male, and it reminded me of your series, Slow Fade to Black, in which you paid tribute, to so many of these R&B, jazz, and soul singers, that previously occurred. And it makes me think of the fact, Daphne Brooks, a wonderful scholar, has an incredible...
her book.
Yes, and she writes about Slow Fade to Black, in it. And again, this idea that these images are timeless in many ways, and you're just repurposing them for this particular moment. And, there's a way in which when there's an exhibition, I imagine art galleries like the exclusivity of the project, right? But that's not what this is, right? These are images, that are placed in all kinds of places. When I drive around the city of Durham, right, including my front lawn, they're posters of the images from this particular series. And so you wanted widespread circulation, but you mentioned, as we were talking beforehand about the difficulty of getting the text to some of these images, to some of these communities, right? So specifically the difficulty of translations to Native populations around the text that are associated with the images. Can you talk a little bit about that challenge?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for asking. You know, I mean, I think a few things. You know, you know, I'm always happy to be in museums and galleries. I think it's important. It's, you know, I am a visual artist, and being in a clean white box is, you know, it's always, it's lovely, and I get a chance to sort of stand back and look at what I've made, what I've done. Mm-hmm. But always trying to figure out how to bring work to a larger public has been critical and important to me for a very long time, and so I keep working in that way. When I started the project, I knew that I wanted to address both the Black and Latinx and Native communities. That would be important because we were the most impacted. And indeed, statistically, Native Americans have been actually the most impacted by COVID-19. They've had the most deaths statistically relative to their numbers in the population, right? So I started with English. I had things translated into Spanish because I thought that would be important, that I wanted to have, again, multiple conversations with different communities. And maybe 9 months ago, I started with Native languages, trying to get very simple text translated into Native languages, not only into Onondagan, which is the community, the Native community that's closest to me in Syracuse, New York, but also in the Midwest. You know, thinking about Creek and you know, the Cherokee and all of the many nations that are there. It has been probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done, and I'm a woman who actually really knows how to get stuff done. Not been able to successfully get my text, which is it's important to protect ourselves and to protect our elders.
Right.
That is my text. That is my text. I have written to translation organizations. I have written to various Native organizations. I have written to, I mean, getting this text, I have it only translated into Creek, but I don't have any other Native languages. It's been a very, very difficult situation, and I don't completely understand the reason why. On the one hand, there's some ideas about sort of protecting the language, not letting the language be manipulated and used in, you know, in ways that are destructive to the language. And at the same time, by not being able to have the work translated, there's a lack of communication then that avails itself in this circumstance and situation. And so it's been a really difficult task. And if there's anybody in your audience that's interested in Native languages or speak various Native languages, please step forward. I'd love to work with you as we actually push more deeply into Native communities in the Midwest. And, you know, and then of course, you know, the problem of language is an interesting one. You know, because one of the things that, you know, that I also begin to realize or understand is that many Native Americans no longer speak their Native and tribal languages. And so then using English actually was more effective than actually having the translations. But I wanted the work translated because I wanted to speak to the elders and to those symbolically who speak the language, to let them know that I understood the necessity of addressing that in this work that I hope has made a difference in the lives of people.
Some of the texts that you've used in the series, you know, discusses that, you know, the vaccination is our only hope. And in some of the work now, you pivoted, right, to encouraging people to vaccinate. Have folks been receptive to those images? Because, we've had some challenges, obviously, in the Black community, both in terms of trust of the medical establishment, but also access, right? So it's both ends, right? A lack of trust and a lack of access, and the lack of access feeds the lack of trust.
And it's creating a crisis. Just like the COVID-19 had a devastating effect on our communities. The lack of access, the questions around how to even get the vaccine, where to go for the vaccine, how to sign up for the vaccine. All of these issues are so complicated. They're so complicated. And so, I'm not a scientist. I'm one sister here, or a doctor, or an organization, or a community center. I'm not any of those things. I'm just one sister trying to figure out how to have a conversation with my community about this thing. And so, in developing, the vaccine came along. And of course, I knew that I was going to take it, though I also had my doubts. But that I think a number of frontline workers, of course, have serious doubts about the vaccine. That they feel as though it's been rushed. They feel as though it's come too quickly. So people that are administering the vaccine are not taking the vaccine, right? And so I thought, okay, I can't tell people what to do, right? I don't want anybody telling me what to do. I can't tell people what to do. But what I can do in the work, once the vaccine came along, and I figured out what the language should be, I thought, okay. The one thing that I could say to people was that our best shot against COVID-19, right? That the vaccine is our best shot against COVID-19. The vaccine is our best shot against COVID-19. The vaccine is our best shot against COVID-19, right? Just putting that out, so as a matter of reflection, of consideration, right? That yes, I understand that you're skeptical, but if we're going to move forward and if we're going to open up this country and the world, we're actually going to have to take it. It is our best shot at the moment. And so this has been sort of an interesting project to work on. How do you simply build awareness around a set of issues that concern not only me, but the community that I love and the people that I care most about in the country? How do I do that successfully? And so I don't know at the moment. I do know that, people have come at me recently. A number of people have come at me recently requesting more of my material around the vaccine, using that as an encouragement in Black, Brown, and Native communities. And so that work is being put out there. A really great group, Orange Media came along, and they're using all of their billboards throughout the Midwest as a site for promoting the idea, again, of the vaccine being our best shot against COVID-19. And several other organizations are also interested. And my hope now, really, Mark, again, when I started this project with two nickels to rub together, and then Syracuse University, where I am the artist in residence for the next several years, generously came on board and gave us resources and funding to step out a little bit more. And then, of course, Duke came on, a number of other universities and cultural institutions, museums, Portland Art Museum, et cetera, have come on board in order to advance the project. People that have had very little, or I should say organizations that have had very little contact with their Brown communities previously. This material as a way of saying to that community, we've overlooked you and we care, and we're going to do this project to show that we care about you and about what's happening with you. And now there are a few corporate entities that are really interested in the project, which I think is really important because indeed, the project really needs to be much larger, much bigger than who I am. That if we're going to really open up the society as we move forward in the next couple of years, this vaccine is really going to matter. And one of the things that's become really obvious to me, I've had my shots, I've had both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I did the Pfizer.
Mm-hmm.
The second one knocked me out, by the way. I was in bed for 24 hours. But the one thing that the aid worker gave to me, she gave me my card back and she said, hold on to this, laminate it and hold on to it because you may need it to travel.
Right.
And the moment she said that, I thought, oh, okay. So now if we don't take the vaccine, there's a real possibility that we won't be able to travel. We won't be able to go back to school. We won't be able to go back to work. We won't be able to go into a restaurant. That this is really going to matter. It's not taking this vaccine is going to have serious effect, a cultural and social effect.
Absolutely.
We decide not to do it, no matter where you come from, no matter what color you are. But if you are an adult past a certain age and you don't take this vaccine, it's going to have some implications down the road. And that's another thing that we have to think about.
Yeah. I want to shift just a bit for a moment, Carrie. Your work has been you've been committed to doing public art, but you yourself has become kind of a public figure over the last few years. So I'm thinking of your cameo in the reboot of Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It. But I'm also thinking about conversations that I saw you had this past year, sitting down with our friend Dwight McBride, who's the new president of the New School of Social Research, sitting down with filmmaker Terrence Nance to have a conversation, and then a conversation with Black Thought, from the Roots. And I'm like, wow, it's like y'all are old friends. Talk a little bit about what it means for you at this stage in your career to have such recognizability in the public sphere, particularly amongst young Black folks working in popular culture.
Oh, wow, it feels like I'm just getting old. No, I mean, the work is so much bigger than I.
Mm-hmm.
I'm led by the work. Of course, I'm happy to speak with Terrence and with, Black Thought, Tariq, and, these are some of my heroes. I mean, I enjoy the platform that I've been given to the extent that I'm able to use it purposefully.
Mm.
Otherwise, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, of course I'm selfish and I have an ego. I mean, I have all that, all that. But I'm really always really thinking about the work, and I'm also thinking about other artists, and I'm thinking about how do I use this body? How do I use this frame, this grace, this thing that I've been given to allow people access? And so somebody gave me some space, recently, just a couple of weeks ago. And said, you can do anything you want. And I thought, oh, okay. Well, let me salute somebody else. Let me pay attention to all these other artists, all these other writers that I'm excited about. I'm doing a project for the Park Avenue Armory. Well, I don't really need 55,000 square feet for myself. Let me share this, right? So I spent the last year thinking about all the other artists that I wanted to be in conversation with, in context with. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to the extent that it allows me to widen the path for the artists and the makers and thinkers that are coming beside me, behind me, right? And so early on in the 1970s or 80s, there was a wonderful book called This Bridge Called My Back.
Yes.
This Bridge Called My Back. And so that's what I am, Mark. I am a sister who is using my body as a bridge. And I understand it, and I feel the weight of it. Sometimes I feel the trauma of it. Sometimes I'm angry because sometimes people don't say thank you. They walk across my back, but they don't say thank you. Sometimes I'm simply appropriated, but that's okay because I think that that's important. But I have a great life. I have a wonderful husband. I have a fantastic family. I have a beautiful daughter. And I have an enormous career that is opening in a way that allows me to concern myself with the dynamics of the field and what it means to be Black in the field, and to bring those voices together to create a cacophony of sound that would not exist otherwise. And as far as I know, most of the projects that I've done, whether it was, the project that I did at the Guggenheim, where I sort of staged a 5-day event and invited you to, you spoke there. Fantastic, amazing experience, right? I mean, it was like a launch pad. It just went off, right? Yeah. Just these amazing voices. And I thought the Guggenheim simply needs to understand really the multitude and the magnitude of the extraordinary work that is being done in the field by Black bodies, Black people. That's what I'm about. That's what you're doing.
Well, I'm thanking you for everything you've done for all of us and for my own career. And I'm going to have Trevor join us in again so that we can curate some of these questions to you from the audience.
Yes, but I want more of you. I want more. Next time I have to interview you.
I would love that.
Interview you, because I think that this is important. I think that really unpacking all of this work that you've been doing around sound and music, I mean, really, I think is really important. And even though you have your own podcast, you have all these other things going on, it would be a joy actually to really hear you, because you've been really important to me in a number of ways. And I have to tell you, I remember so clearly your presentation at the Guggenheim. It was a knockout. It was, again, a sort of great launch pad. So your thinking, your criticality, the work that you're doing is really important. And thank you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you very much. I'm honored to hear that. Thank you. Humbled. You can jump back in, Trevor.
So I'm back in, Carrie and Mark. I just want to say that at the moment, there are no pressing questions. So if you want to keep going.
Yeah, well, I will ask you, Carrie, about a project you did over the summer with Carl, Baptism, which was a tribute to, C.T. Vivian and the great John Lewis, my fraternity brother, Phi Beta Sigma Go.
Did you know John?
I never got a chance to meet him, unfortunately. But, he was one of those figures, as someone who was still around from that moment, it was if we all knew him, from the video of him dancing, in his offices with his staff, the way that he made himself into someone that was accessible to us. It wasn't just history. Right. He was there with us and resonated with us in a way. And his death, I don't think we've ever seen that kind of attention, since Malcolm and really, King to the passing of someone who was a statesman, in the way that John Lewis was.
Anna Devere Smith's articulation of him.
Yes.
So fabulous, right?
Yes.
Like
yes.
really incredible, her interpretation of Lewis. But yeah, what's your question?
Yeah, just to talk a little bit about pulling that project together, Baptism, with Carl.
going to send you something later. Carl called me actually out of the blue in the summer. I was, up to here with COVID. I was just drowning in COVID. I had so much work to do, and I continue to have so much work to do around it. And Carl, in the middle of the afternoon, called me and told me about this project that he was working on, and that he thought that maybe I would direct it, that I would make it. And I was a little overwhelmed, but of course I said yes, because Carl is amazing, and we've worked together on a number of projects, and he's been there for me in so many ways over the last few years. Indeed, he was in my project Grace Notes, and wrote several really beautiful pieces for it. So Carl has a command of language and a way with language that always intrigues me, because it's both concrete and abstract simultaneously. And that it's always, that the essays are always sort of straddling a kind of poetry. That they're never just essays. They're sort of poetic interpretations of essays, right? Which is sort of wonderful when because when I realized that, that I could also create then a work that was also poetic, right? This idea of baptism, that I could deal with sparkling water and nature and flora and fauna and things that grow, that have other forms, and that all life in one way or another is this sort of flowering, right? And then a sort of collapse of flower. Like I'm looking at these beautiful flowers that someone gave me about a week ago. They were so beautiful, that are now starting to sort of fade in on themselves. And so I decided to sort of use Carl's text really as the metaphor and the anchor for how the piece would look and how the piece would work. And the piece actually exists in several iterations. There's not only the John Lewis C.T. Vivian video piece, Baptism, with its own elegance and purpose. I really love this piece, but also spontaneously, which is the thing that I love about being in person in the room with someone, is that I just happened to ask him a question, right? Which was not planned. It was not really a part of the shoot. I just asked him, when did he actually become really aware of John Lewis? And then I started filming that. And his response to the question led to a series of interviews with him that are absolutely magical, very profound. And I learned about Carl in a way that I had never known Carl before. Really, his sort of relationship to civil rights, his relationship to human rights, his relationship to gayness, his relationship to his brother who died of AIDS, his understanding. Right? And those videos are also available through the Lincoln Center website, and they are really quite extraordinary. They're really beautiful. They're really beautiful,
You mentioned folks that you've collaborated with. Are there folks that you have yet to collaborate with that you really want to?
I really want to collaborate with? It's interesting. I mean, in a weird way, I'm really not. In a strange way, I'm really not a collaborator. I'm really like an impresario. I'm not just like a person who kind of makes things happen. I think
Quincy Jones.
It's like a part of my nature. It's like, the sort of ability to sort of pull people together from disparate spheres and to put them together in an interesting way. And so even though I've worked with a lot of people, I'm usually kind of the director of a project, which is probably a good place for me because I never like being told what to do.
Yesterday, Carrie, we all got the tragic news about the shootings in Atlanta. And of course, we're recognizing a changing same in an American society, which is anti-Asian violence. It's now something that's now bubbled up into the forefront again. Given everything that we've experienced through the last year, through police killings to COVID, to a leadership that fundamentally failed, do you find yourself hopeful at this moment?
Well, yes and no. Of course, I'm always critical. I can't help myself, right? I'm always looking. I'm always trying to assess really what's happening in relationship to a thing, to an event, to a phenomena. But yes, I'm hopeful. There is something that's going on. There's no doubt. There are kinds. I think there's a great new group of fabulous young artists across the fields, that are coming along that I'm really excited about. There are questions that are being raised, even within the sort of the Trump years. One of the things that, that helped America understand where we were was indeed having Trump in office. And of course, the killing of George Floyd, that George Floyd had to die, right? In order for people to realize something on a very different level, meant that his life was not given in vain. Right? That, the worldwide protest that sprung up around the killing of this man was unlike anything we've seen in this country in the last 50 years. It was an extraordinary thing, and it tells me that the world is on notice in a different way. And that if we are going to have a future, then we understand that future will be diverse, that it will be dynamically diverse, and that there are a number of voices that have to come together, weave together in order to build a new future. And so even while it happened out of trauma, the great thing that came out of it was, I think, this sort of beautiful flicker of light that we can hold on to. And if we don't have that light to hold on to, then our lives are really nothing. Because at the end of the day, it's only the light that you can hold on to. You really can't hold on to the darkness, right? The light has to pull you through that thing, no matter what that thing is, right? Yeah. And so, yes, I am absolutely hopeful. But I'll tell you one more thing before we go, and I know that we have to leave soon. Not unlike, the difficulty in having conversations with Native Americans around language. It's been also difficult having conversations with Asian Americans around the targeted violence that they experienced in this last year. And there is something about this notion of saving face in the Asian community that is problematic for it. And so even while Native Asian Americans came to me, a group of Asian Americans came to me about joining me in our COVID effort, they kept asking me what I thought. And I said, this is the space for your voice, not necessarily my voice, but your voice. And they kept backing away from me. So we have these issues that we have to sort through and unpack, but they are deep and they are sustained and they are systemic, and we have to look at them seriously to advance. And we have to ask real questions about what it means.
So many folks in the Q&A, Carrie, have said that this conversation has been a gift. It has indeed been a gift to me, as I'm sure it has been for many of the audience and for Trevor and the staff at the Nasher. Absolutely want to thank you for taking time, to talk with us today about your work and your passions and your concerns. I want to thank you, something that was also echoed in the Q&A, for your generosity of spirit and time and all those things. And I'm going to pass it on to Trevor now to take us home.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carrie and Mark, for the conversation. As Mark just mentioned, the Q&A was as much just laudatory comments about how we could listen to this for another hour, how people would love to hear Carrie interview you, Mark.
Yes.
Just you two in conversation is a gift to everyone. Kinshasa Conwell had a wonderful comment about the importance of generosity in your work, Carrie. Would love to hear more about that. We're sort of out of time, but one thing that's really come up at the end is just a closing remark. Are there any more locations, partners, or sites to be pursued in this project at this time, or are you transitioning at this point to a new project?
Well, I would like to transition to a new project. But COVID has me by the arm. It's pulling me around. And, really, I keep thinking, I'm done. And now, the vaccine is here and I have to really think about that. This is urgent. This is urgent. I mean, I wanna go outside. I wanna see my friends. I wanna hug my daughter. I wanna see my mother, right? And we can't do that until we are on the other side of midnight, as I say, and that is in part really taking the vaccine. So I'm still working with this project, and more cities are coming on board, which is really great. And as I said, I've been in conversation over the last literally 48 hours with a couple of other major institutions that are really interested in taking the work to spread the word and the importance about taking the vaccine, and all of the questions that come up around that. And so now that's the material that I'm working on, is how to structure this work, how to build the image, how to build the language, so that, again, it's not telling people what to do, but it offers a set of reflections and considerations that we might want to keep in mind as we move forward in the next 6 months to a year. And beyond that, of course, I'm working on the Armory project, and I'm hoping that you, Trevor, and Mark will join me at the Armory for another wonderful group of symposiums, exhibitions, lectures, and performances.
Would love that.
Yeah, that would be an honor. Without stating, we'll be there. As we come to a close, I just want to thank you both again. Carrie, it's been such a pleasure and a joy working with you on this really important project. And Mark, not only facilitating this conversation today with Carrie that was so enriching, but also working with Duke and the Nasher with your classes around the project. And we didn't even get to the fact that your students made playlists. So in response to this, that I'm sure Carrie would appreciate.
Just send them to me.
I will do that.
I just say thank you both. Thank you everyone for joining us today in this program from the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Carrie.
Be well, and we will see you on the other side of midnight. Bye.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts, and every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black, everything black, culture over everything, y'all. We taking it back, black.